like to thank you all for coming. I think it'll be a great night. How many times have you spoken the last week to different crowds? 6, 4, 5, or 6. She can't remember. So maybe she'll forget her speech too if she doesn't write them down. So anyway, we're here tonight for Mary Bennett from Linefork Kentucky, Sonshine Children's Center, and Foursquare Gospel Church. I think it's going to be a great evening. We'll open with prayer, and then we've got a 4-minute little slide presentation or little video. So let's open with a word of prayer. Our gracious Lord, we thank you for this night. We thank you that Mary could come up here, and we know that she will inspire us as she has me. We thank you for the health and strength that you have given her in the past couple of years. She's recuperated well, and we thank you that she could be here. Bless this night and everyone that's here, that they too may go away with something to inspire their life. In Jesus' name, amen. This was put together by Wes Craft. He goes down there as one of the drivers with me and others when we go down there. That's the church right there. That's a painting inside of the church. That's the old homestead there. It's a big bag of cereal. gives you a little idea where she lives and the different buildings that are down there and what happens down there. But I would just like to introduce Mary. Met her about 16 years ago, and she's really been an inspiration to my life, but the inspiration that she is to so many lives. And I'm sure she doesn't have a written speech, and that she'll go somewheres, and it will be an inspiration. Mary, it's all yours.
Wow, what a crowd. I just want you to know that I'm not as old as I look. When I was young, I never thought I'd get this old. But I want to talk. Okay. what Larry and Judy and their teams that come down has meant so much to us. I was just in a shell of a building, and now it's that big, beautiful church we have. So I credit that to them and their teams that have come and worked so hard, putting in carpet and tile and pews and stoves and hot water tanks and doors, and they've done it all. So I want any of you that want to come and see us, come and see us. He wants me to tell you about my life and how I grew up and how I come there. I was born and raised there, and it was a very, very poor area. If you ever get on YouTube, there's another 4-minute video that will show you Linefork is its poorest time. When I was growing up, it's called The Power of One, Mary Bennett. And just keep looking till you get it, because it's on there. And I was one of 16 children that we know of. I'm sure my dad had a lot more children, because mountain men have more than one woman. And he had his share too. So Mom and Dad got married when she was 14 and he was 17. And she didn't have a mother. And she wanted to get away from her stepmother because her mother had died in childbirth. She told me they had a self-made doctor that went around delivering babies, and most of the mothers died. And he would go around taking out tonsils out of every child, and most of them died. But she wouldn't let him take our tonsils out, so I guess that's why I'm here tonight. But Mom and Dad got married, and there was no road in Linefork. It was just you had to walk in the middle of the creek. And they walked through the mountain and over the mountain, which just had a trail, not a road. And they went into a community called Lynch, Kentucky. It was called Lynch, Kentucky because that's what they did there. They tarred and feathered. And my dad was involved in that for a few years. And she took in boarders. It's a mining camp. And she charged the boarders $1 a week, $1 a day maybe. No, she just charged them $1 a week. And because they only made $5 a week. And these men were from Hungary, Russia, Italy, you name it. They were there to make money to send back home to their families. And so, and when she saved up $400, she went back to Linefork and bought 400 acres of land and a house. And she started raising her rest of her family. She'd had one baby at that time, and it had starved to death. Little girl. It was allergic to milk, so she couldn't feed it. And no mother around there could feed it. They tried many different mothers, and none of them could feed it. So the baby literally starved to death in less than 2 months. So she started having children, and Dad started drinking heavy. And if it hadn't been for our mother, we probably would have starved, because he spent his $5 a week on women and drinking and gambling. I was used to feuds and fights and beatings. We all took our share of beatings. And I'm shaking, but I want to tell you why. I'm not nervous. I'm very calm. But when I was in the hospital, my nerves was damaged from a lot of things, and ever since I come home, I shake, and I said, I don't know why, but anyway, overlook it, please. Um, so Dad had some women, and he'd have gambling parties, and they would do it right in front of us, and we lived in one room. It was 16 by 19 feet, and it was just all beds. And there was like 5 of us in a bed, and the rest of them was on the floor. And uh, down in the yard, down that little hill, was another shack called the kitchen, and that's where we ate our meals. And there was nothing in that room but a coal stove and table or two. And that's how I grew up. We walked to school, we didn't have buses, and we didn't have clothes or shoes. But Dad would bring his women home. After he'd spend the weekend with them and spend his $5, he'd bring them home and demand that my mother give them food. And he would say, go to the cellar and get this woman some food. Her children are hungry, and you can give her some of your beans and some of your peaches, and be sure that you give her some tomatoes, because she can make some tomato soup for her family. So Mom would do that quietly and not say anything. She would take her beatings and not say anything. She wouldn't cry in front of us. And when I would tell her that I hated my dad, and I really truly did, she would tell me to be quiet and not to talk about my daddy. And so I planned to kill him, and I was going to kill him one way or another. So that laid in my brain a long time. And there was a blind man in the community, and his eyes had been blown out in a coal mining accident. And he'd come over, and I would walk with him around the farm, and he would talk to me about God. And I'd say, well, I hate my daddy. And he'd say, now you hush. You apologize right now to God and ask him to forgive you. You can't hate people. And so I quit telling him about my daddy, and I quit telling Mom about him, because they just didn't want to hear it. And so one day he asked me to go to his shack, because he had had a vision about a girl the night before, and he wanted me to write it down. And in this vision, this young mountain girl was going to leave the mountains, and she was going to get an education. And then she was going to have a terrible, terrible heartache. And after that, she would return back to the mountains, and it just went on and on about her life. Well, I'd had a sister that was 15 and just left home a few months before, and she had $10 in her pocket. And I asked her, where are you going? And she said, I'm going to California. Well, Kentucky is a long ways from California, and I worried about her. So when I asked him, is this my sister? He said, no, it's not your sister, but I can't tell you who it's about. So, but if you ever want these papers, you can ask my family to give them to you, and they'll give them to you. Well, my dad continued with his love life and his cruelty and brutality, but another time he came down the road. At that time we had a dirt road. He had this floozy hanging on his arm, and they came into the yard, and I was in the yard, and I would shake all over when I'd see him coming, because I knew we had a bad night ahead. And so I looked out the corner of my eye. My mother was over on the edge of the yard, and she always wore aprons, and she had her hands in her pocket like she always did when she wore her aprons. And so Dad comes stumbling up the steps with that woman, and he yelled at my mother to go get her some food, that they were hungry, and she needed to give her some peaches and some beans and corn, and be sure and give her some tomatoes, because she can make tomato soup for her kids. Well, Mom didn't move, and I panicked. I kept saying, oh God, please, Mom, move, to myself. And thank you, Judy. Just sit right there. So she didn't move, and he yelled at her again to move, go get that food for her. And she still didn't move. And after a time or two more, he yelled at her to go get the food. Mom's hand came out of her pocket with a pistol in it. And she said, if you're not getting a bite of food that I have prepared for my children, and if you try to take it, I'll kill both of you. Well, the last time I looked, the woman was running as fast as she could down the road. And my dad stumbled in the house and passed out at the door. So I knew that night we would probably die. But he woke up, sobered up, and never mentioned it. And I think she had him bluffed, and he didn't know where that gun was either, so he wasn't going to take a chance on her. But she wasn't a fighter. She never complained. But he would beat her at night, and I could hear him beating her. And I was the last one to leave home. All the rest had left home. And I heard him beating her one night, and he was hitting her with his fist in the face. And I decided that would be the night I would kill him. So I got my shotgun and I loaded it. I started down the steps. I was sleeping up in the attic. And I was going one step at a time. And I fell. And that gun went thump, 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 thump down the steps and hit the floor. And anybody that's around guns, there's a sound that you know immediately when a gun hits the floor. So my dad got very quiet. And another time, and then I grabbed the gun and went back up the steps because I thought I'd lost my chance to kill him. So the next time he was beating her, I heard him yelling at her and saying, "What did you do?" And she said, "Nothing." He said, "Yes, you did too. Where did you get that glass?" She said, "Nowhere. I don't have no glass." He said, "Well, what did you do?" And he kept that up for a long time. And the next morning I asked her, "Mom, what was he talking about?" And she said, "Well, he was beating me in the head, and all of a sudden he hit glass. He hit a sheet of glass, and I don't know where it come from." But she went up in the mountains behind the house, and she cried out to God and said, "I can't take it no more. I just can't. I just can't." And God instilled in her a peace about it, and she went on to. She was comforted with God's peace, and so my dad would always say all of us had to leave home by 18. We could not roost at that house. We had to move on. And so I didn't know what I was going to do. I was the last one. I weighed 79 pounds. I had about a 5th grade education. I did not know where I was going or what I could do in life. And so I prayed about it, and I asked that blind man to pray for me. And so one day a girl came into the community. She was a beautiful, beautiful blonde. And nobody had ever seen a blonde girl before. Nobody had ever seen a girl that had a car. She had a car. And so she became a friend of mine briefly. And I would ask her, "Where are you going to go when you get 18? And she'd say, she didn't know what I meant. Finally I said, "You mean your dad ain't making you leave home when you're 18? And she said, "Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm going to join the Air Force." And I said, "Well, I'll join it with you." But she never showed up at the recruiter. I was there, and she didn't show up. I never saw her again. I think God put her in my life so I would have an option of what to do. Well, the recruiter told me he could tell I didn't know how to fill out take the test. So he said, "If you leave it laying on the table and get up and leave, I'll fill it out for you." So I did, and I got in the Air Force. And he said, "Now you have to weigh 100 pounds. So take these bananas," and he gave me a big bunch of bananas, and said, "Now you eat every one of them before they weigh you in." Well, I hadn't had no bananas in my life, and I thought they tasted awful, and I wouldn't eat them. But when I got to Texas, let me tell you about going to Texas. I had read some little Western books by Zane Grey. Some of you might be old enough to remember him. And I loved them. They was all the same story. Some rich rancher in Texas, she would write to a niece in New York or Chicago and say, come out to Texas and take over the ranch and I'll will everything to you. And every time the girl went, she'd find a cowboy and get married. Lived happy ever after. So I wasn't about to marry no mountain man. They didn't have teeth. They didn't work. And I wasn't gonna marry one. So I said, I'm going to Texas and I'm going to marry a cowboy. Well, I was been all over Texas looking for a cowboy. Didn't find one. And so when I got to the airport, to the base, we had to line up to be weighed in. And she yelled at me and said, how much do you weigh? And I said, 79 pounds, ma'am. Well, she didn't like that answer. She said, get on those scales and weigh again and tell me how much you weigh. And I said, 79 pounds, ma'am. And she'd say it the third time. And she said, now I'm going to turn my back. You have to weigh 100 pounds before you can get in. I want you to weigh yourself and tell me how much you weigh. And I was sort of ignorant, so I hollered, 79 pounds, ma'am. She cussed me out, which didn't bother me. I was used to getting cussed out. And I was used to working. I remember as early as 5 years of age, I was in the field with my brothers and sisters, hoeing corn and everything else. And we'd work all day long, and we would go in at evening. And so I was a hard worker in the military, and I found favor with them. And I was promoted. And they trained me to train TDY people, temporary duty people. And that was the people that had occupations that kept them from going into the military. So they only had to serve 6 weeks or 12 weeks, and their time was up. And that was singers or movie stars or I don't know who all. But I had one boy from Hollywood, and he every time I'd say, what are you going to do this weekend? Well, I'm going to fly back to Hollywood and work. And I'd say, ain't that a lot of money? And, he'd just smile and say nothing else. So when his time was up, he said, I would like to give a party and invite all the girls in your barracks. And there was about 50 girls in the barracks. And he said, I'll send limousines and pick you up, and we'll take you over to the Army base, about 12 miles away. And he said, we'll have a cookout. And I said, well, I don't know what a cookout is, but I got all the girls to go. And we got in the different limousines, and they drove us over there. And there was live music, and it was a lively party. The Army base had over 100,000 GIs, and they all came out to see those 50 girls. Well, they hadn't seen girls for a while, and they were very happy. And this one guy, what really attracted me to him, but I really didn't like him either, is his teeth was pearly white. Yes, sir. And I thought, I sure wouldn't be friendly if he had those pretty teeth. But he wanted me to go over and sit in the swing with him and swing. And I said, well, I want to watch the cookout. I didn't know what a cookout was. And he just kept swinging away. Girls, watch people like that. I noticed that he was looking at me this way. And I turned to him and I said, what are you looking at? He said, I'm looking at you. You got blue eyes, and I ain't never seen no blue eyes on a woman. Well, he lied. And he kept lying until I married him. So I decided that I would marry him. He was a good man. We started going to the church and everything else. But he got sent on deployed to Korea. And when he came back, he was different. And then he got deployed to Vietnam, and he was really different. And he had been a gunner, and he would tell me about things he had done. And I'd say, don't tell me those things because I don't want to hear them. That's all I grew up with was knife fights and gun fights and feuds, and I don't want to hear it. And I didn't realize that the man probably had PTSD and was struggling with it. And so he also had women. And they would call my house and ask for him, and I'd say to myself, you can be like your mom and endure it, or you can walk. And I said, I'm walking. And I went to Los Angeles to look for work. I walked the streets of Los Angeles until blood came out of my shoes. I didn't know the town. I didn't have any. It's a big place, and I wasn't sure where I was going or what I was doing. I first went into LA Times, and the lady said, yeah, we got a job that's available. We'll hire you. And I was filling out the application, and she said, no, we're not going to hire you. You go on down the street. You can do better than what I've got to offer you. And I said, ma'am, I need this job. I had no place to rent. I had no money. I just need this job. And she said, no, go on down the street and look for another job. Well, I was a real hick. And I walked on down to the AT&T building. And I went in and went to personnel, and I told the woman I wanted to a job. And she said, well, sit over and type for me. Let me see how good you can type. And I'd never typed in my entire life. So I sat down there, and I just sit there. And she said, you're hired. And I said, ma'am, I don't know how to type. She said, that's okay. I like the way you're dressed. And you'll do good for this company. Well, I hid my feet under the seat so she couldn't see the blood coming out of the shoes. And she hired me, and in just a short time, they promoted me to management. I never have understood that. I was a supervisor over supervisors who had been there 20 years, and I could not understand how, unless it was favor of God. And but one day I hired this girl to work. She had been a convert from a missionary that had gone over to her country of Honduras. And she had come back to go to Bible college over here. And I asked her, what do you do every evening? And she said, oh, I go to Bible college. And I need to tell you that I really thought, because I was going to go through a divorce, that I was on my way to hell. I thought no person that gets a divorce can go to heaven. I don't know where I heard that or where I thought, who told me that, but it was just a lie from Satan. And I thought, oh, mercy, I'm going to hell. But I don't know what hell's like. I need to find out what hell's like. So every day I'd ask this Bible school student, tell me about hell. And she'd tell me a little bit. And the next day I'd say, tell me some more about hell. And after a while, she got fed up with me. She said, why don't you go down there to the Bible college and take a course on hell? And I said, I will. And I went down to the Bible college, and I walked in the office, and I said, I want to take some courses on hell. And you know what? He just smiled. And he signed me up for Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and 12 hours of college, and not a one of those books was on hell. And I was upset. I thought, this is crazy. I want to know. I'm not going to heaven. I don't need to know about heaven. I need to know about hell. And but I love studying. So I was just grasping every straw of learning. And I got so carried away with it that I just signed up every semester for more classes, and none of them was on hell. I couldn't figure out why they wouldn't talk about hell. But I was trying all the time to learn about hell. I said, God, I won't mess around. I won't drink. I won't cuss. I won't do none of those things, but I know I'm going to split hell wide open. And so I didn't have a social life. I didn't want one. Because when I wasn't going to Bible college and working full time, I was crying. The worst heartache that anybody could ever go through. I had failed in a great way, and I did not know how to handle it. But I wouldn't tell nobody. Nobody at that Bible college knew that I was married and seeking a divorce. Nobody that knew me at work knew that I was married and seeking a divorce. I just didn't share my life with nobody. But all of a sudden, God started dealing with me about going back to the mountains. And I said, oh, no, I'm not going back there with those ignorant people. I'm not going back there where there's incest and wife abuse and children abuse and feuds and fights. I'm just not going to do it. You get somebody else. And he would just impress on me to go back to Linefork. He really and truly needed me. And I'd say, no, let them go to hell. Ain't none of them that back there would believe me anyway. So it's a long story, and there's going to come out a book pretty soon. You can read about it, but I just cry at night myself to sleep. And one night as I was down praying after work, I'd worked till 2 o'clock in the morning. I saw a mountain. God showed me a mountain. It was just as tall in the sky as I could see. And there wasn't one tree on that mountain. And there was only one staircase down the mountain, and it had no handrail. And I was in the middle of that mountain with a multitude of people around me. And they were pressing in on me to keep from falling over the edge. And I was screaming at them, you're smothering me. You're crushing me. Move back. Move back. And they wouldn't move back, so I just kept pushing them away. And all of a sudden, 3 of them fell off the mountain. And they fell forever and ever and ever. And I remember looking up to heaven and saying, God, what do you want me to do? They're going to kill me. They're going to crush me. And he said, go over to the top of the staircase and take each one by the hand. And I will, if you put them on the top step, I will take them down the mountain the rest of the way. So as I put each person on the step, they would laugh and giggle and sing as they got down the stairs. And it was thousands of steps down to the valley. And when they all got to the valley, it was just one big roar of happiness coming up, singing and joy. And I remember looking up to heaven and saying, God, what do you want me to do? He says, I want you to go back to Linefork, Kentucky and open up a church. I want you to, when the people start smothering you with their traditions and their ways, or they start pressing you, crushing you, just remember I placed you there for one reason. I put you there to point them how to go to heaven. If you'll get them started, I'll take them the rest of the way. And many times over the years, I wanted them to go to hell. That's where I wanted them to go. And I was telling them about heaven, but let me tell you how I found out that I was going to heaven. I always forget to tell this. I'd been going to college 4 years, total. But it took me longer. I didn't fail. And I had thought for those whole 4 years of college that I was going to hell. I never asked nobody. I never told nobody. I just knew I was going to hell. And so I had 3 days left to graduate. And I always went into the classroom first, as soon as I got there, and sit on the front pew. And some young boys came in, and they sat in the back of the church, and they was acting so foolish. And I thought, my goodness, these are going to be preachers and youth leaders and choir directors, and they're acting goofy. They need to all go to hell, you know. And here I'm going to hell for not doing nothing wrong, just getting a divorce. And all of a sudden the professor come in and he said, we're not going to have class no more. So we'll just talk and answer questions about it. And one of those little smart aleck boys yelled out and said, can divorced people go to heaven? And I sat straight up and said, now let him tell me that. I want to hear this answer. And the professor said, of course they can. If there's adultery involved or fornication, you can go to heaven if you get a divorce. And I thought, ooh, the whole world came off my shoulders all at one time. And so now I believed I was going to heaven. And I was back in Linefork, Kentucky, among the ignorant. And they were hard to teach. They spit their tobacco out the windows. We don't have no windows in here. Women and men. And there's a water bucket in the back of the church that had one dipper. And they all drunk from that all during the service. Then they'd go out and stand in the doorway and smoke and blow the smoke back in the church. They'd bring their dogs to church. They brought their guns to church. And it was just ridiculous. And so I told them they had to quit spitting out the window. And they had to quit getting up and going back to the back to drink water and smoke cigarettes. Well, they said, well, the Spirit of the Lord can't stay here. You just pushed it right out the window. If we can't spit and we can't move around, the Lord can't move. So I ruined all their spirit. But one day I was preaching and it was a copperhead coming through the window. And I knew that if I said one word, every one of them would pull the gun out and I'd probably get shot because they was trying to hit the snake. So I didn't say nothing. So when it got close to me, I just threw a hymn book on it and jumped on it and squished it. And as I was jumping up and down, trying to kill it, the people thought I had the Spirit on me, so they started jumping up and down. And they were dancing all over the place, and I thought, well, this is what I was doing. I was killing that snake. Well, the church just emptied. Everybody left. But there wasn't a time, I guess, we had church that we did not kill a snake. So everybody came prepared. Water baptisms were horrible. I didn't want to baptize nobody because 9 times out of 10, there'd be a boy jump in the water, swim under the water, pull my legs up from under me and hold me under. And I couldn't get up. And the men were big. Not as big as you, Gary, but they said I was never going to get married, and I asked them why, and they said, well, you're too skinny. We like our women like we like our hogs, well fed. And so here I had this big man out there baptizing him one time, and he wouldn't go under. And they said if your nose didn't go under, you weren't baptized. So I knew I had to get his nose under because they were taking pictures. And if they saw his nose left out of the water, he wouldn't baptize. I'd see him. So I baptized him, and he wouldn't go under, so I jumped on him. And I was sitting on top of that man, and he went under, and he said, you nearly drowned me. So everything was different, and I wanted it to be like in the city, where people come to church, so it's quiet, they bowed their head, they prayed, they went home. Not these people. Everything they did was different. And I told them, I said, you know, most churches away from here, they buy their pastor a car, or send them to Hawaii, or they send them to Israel. And I said, it's my birthday coming up. And guess what I got? This woman come in the church, and she said, had a little old greasy brown lunch bag, and she said, I wished it was $1 million. And I opened it up, and it was a pair of used pantyhose. My only gift I ever got. But bless her heart, she would come to church so faithful. And her husband would shoot at her to keep her from going to church. And she'd jump over a fence and fall and come to church dirty and muddy. And I'd say, what happened? She'd say, well, he's shooting at me again. and I fell. And another woman called me, and she said, "Come over, I need to talk to you." So I went over, and I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "Well, look at my bed." She said, "All my bed legs are shot out from under me last night." Said, "My husband, I ran out the house, and he thought I was in the outhouse, so he filled the outhouse full of bullet holes. And I was up on the hill watching him, and he said that he's going to tar and feather me if he ever caught me." And so I said, she said, "I just want to know if I should stay with him." I said, "Ma'am, there ain't nowhere in the Bible that tells me that you have to stay with a mean man like that." And she said, "Well, I guess I'll just stay." Said, "I'd probably miss him so much by bedtime, I'd come home anyway." So I didn't try to counsel nobody. I didn't try to tell them nothing. I just let them go the way they wanted. Well, to get through the story, God was dealing with me about building a children's home. And I had already 6 or 7 or maybe 8 children that was living with me that parents had given me. One little girl was 4, and I asked her if she wanted to go home with me so I could clean her up for kindergarten. And she'd never had a bath, and her hair stood straight out with like sand was in it with syrup. And her little face was dirty, and she wore her mommy's shoes, which was real long, and her little foot was short. And she just was pitiful. And I took her home, and I gave her a bath before I would feed her. I just got her in a tub and was giving her a bath, and she was screaming at the top of her lungs. She thought I was trying to kill her. And so I finally got her hair shampooed and blow dried, and I put her hand up on her hair, and she ran her hand down her silky hair and screamed. And I would do it again and again, and she'd scream. And I held her up to a mirror, and she didn't know who she was. She just screamed. And so the next morning, for kindergarten, I had to put her on the bus, and I said, "Now you go home tonight. You know the road. There's just one road, and you know your house. Get off the bus at your house." But when the bus came by, she got off my house. And I asked her why, and she said, "Because I wanted to." And she wouldn't go home. So every so often, I would make her go home for the weekend just so they'd leave her alone and wouldn't beg her to come home. Well, when she was 7, I was out in the garden, hoeing my garden, and I saw this old beat-up truck come. And this evil man got out, and this woman, they were both evil. And I ran across the field to get in the house to see what they wanted. And it was her mother and her grandfather. And I asked them, "What do you want?" And he said, "Well, she's 7, and she can be making money. We're going to take her with us." And I said, "If you let any man touch this child, I'll put both of you in prison." And I yelled at her and said, "Don't forget, if you want an escape, ask God, and He'll provide an escape for you." Well, about an hour or two, she came back. Some woman let her out at the road. And I said, "Well, what happened?" And she said, "Well, they stopped the truck and got out to go in and get some pop at a country store. And somebody came along and said, 'What are you doing in that truck? Get out of that truck and get in the car. I'm taking you back up the road.' And she said, 'I prayed that God would make a way of escape,' and He did." And the girl grew up and went off to Bible college. And while she was in Bible college, I'd taken these 3 children in, and I'll tell you their ages, but he'll deny it when I tell you. 3, 4, and 5. Ain't that y'all just 1 year apart? And the mother was just a hussy. She liked men. And she had 2 boyfriends living with her. And she had let those men molest the children. And I was a big part of putting her in prison and those 2 men. And I asked for 20 years each. And that's what they gave them. But after 4.5 years, the jails were so full that they let them, prison was so full they let them out. Well, one of the men came home, went to his brother's house, and said, "Can I stay with you for a few days till I get on my feet?" And his brother said, "Yes." Well, that night, he murdered his sister-in-law, beat her to death, and said, "I've got one more woman I'm going to kill." And so people call me all night saying, "Get the gun, lock your doors, hide the children." But he never made it to my house. He got arrested and sent back to prison. He mysteriously died a month or so later. Prisoners killed him for some reason. But Mary came home. Her name is Mary also. And from Bible college that weekend, and I said, "Mary, they arrested this man." And I said, I bet he's molested every child on Linefork. And all of a sudden, I saw big tears running down her face. And I said, "Honey, what's wrong?" And she said, "You know those weekends you made me go home?" He was one of the men that molested me. And she said, she was 19. And she said, "I'll be 35 and I'll still be having nightmares." And I said, "No, you'll be 65 if God does not heal you." And so the other children were growing up, and the little girl, she was, I'm pretty sure she's 3. You might say 4, whatever. But I've had over 120 kids, so it's not easy to remember birthdays. But she, every night I would kneel with her and ask God to take the memories from her mind, and she wouldn't remember nothing bad, just good stuff. And today she says, "I don't have no bad memories of anything happening to me." And so these kids continued to come, and God kept dealing with me about building a home. And I said, "God, the only thing I know how to build is an outhouse." Every Halloween, somebody would burn my outhouse or turn it over, and I'd have to build another one. And I said, "If you want me to build an outhouse, that's all I'm going to build, because if I build a house, I'll be stuck here. And I'm not going to stay." I told my company I'd be back in a year. And they said, "Well, we'll hold your job for 2 years if you'll come back." And I said, "I'm not going to stay." So a little biracial boy came, and he was drug baby. He was the wrong color for that neighborhood. And they told me, "If you keep this baby, your ministry here is ruined." And I thought, well, I'll go back to California. But what's going to happen to this baby? I cooked every meal with him on my shoulder. I preached every sermon with him on my shoulder. If he went to sleep, I laid him at the floor and put my foot on him so he could feel me. I slept every night in a chair with him on my shoulder all night long. Everything I did, he was on my shoulder. And I knew that the baby would not survive without me. And the other children, I said, they'll have to go back into their own environment, and that's not good. We don't want them to go back. And he said, he will get up and move, do what I want you to do. And I said, finally I just said, "Well, Lord, I don't care if this baby is purple, I'm going to keep him." And he said, "Now you can get busy, because I know you don't have prejudice in your heart." And there was times when I didn't even have a bite of food to eat, but I wouldn't tell nobody. And one day a bread truck went through, and he stopped and he said, "Would you like to buy some bread?" And I said, "No, I don't need any," because I had $10 and I wanted to keep it for emergency. And he stayed a while and talked with me, and he said, "The bread's only 43 cents a loaf. You want to buy some?" And I said, "No, I don't need none." And I had not one stick of food in my freezer, not one one back. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, if you'll buy this truckload of bread, I'll give it to you for $10. And there was a motive behind it, but I was angry that he would take my last $10. But that bread filled up my freezer to the top. And when I had 80 chickens, and they all had roosted out on the hillside in the trees. And that night we got 36 inches of snow. And the chickens couldn't get down. So they dropped their eggs into the snow. And I would go out and dig out a bowl of eggs or a bucket of eggs and go back in and fix the kids' egg sandwiches and toast, or scrambled eggs and toast, fried eggs and toast, egg salad, whatever I could. They ate eggs, eggs, eggs all day long. And when all the eggs and bread was gone, the snow was melted, and I had some money to go get some groceries. But and God told me, if you'll just do what I told you to do, you'll never have to pray for food or money. I will provide, as long as you don't let one penny stick to your fingers. And I didn't believe him altogether. I thought, that can't be true. There's a dozen children here and no food. How can he feed us? And I'll tell you over and over in the book how many different ways he fed us. And that food would always run out. And so I went ahead and built the house. I went to California and raised. I told God, if you'll just let me raise $300 a night, I'll know you're behind this. Because I ain't going to build nothing but an outhouse. And so the first night I spoke at a church. It was a Bible study for just old people was there. And I talked negative. I said, I don't really want to build this house, but God says build it. And I told him about the children and how they came to me. And after church, this woman came up, and I told God, $300, and ain't nobody in here got that much. And so after church, this woman came up and said, would you come down tomorrow and go to the bank with me? And I said, why? And she said, well, I'm going to give you some money. And I said, oh, you just keep your money. You might need it. You might go in a nursing home. You might need your money. And she said, no, come down tomorrow and take me to the bank. And after several tries, she said, I said, what do you want to give me money for? And she said, because God told me to. And I said, okay, how much? And she said, $10,000. I said, oh, God, no. Lord, no. I'll have to give every penny of this back. Because I was not going to build that house. And, but thing after thing happened, and the next thing I knew, I had a beautiful home built for children. It took 2 years, but it was paid for. And God kept impressing on me that if I wouldn't let money stick to my fingers, he would keep providing. And he has, the church has been built, guest house has been built, a bunkhouse that sleeps 30 has been built, an apartment has been built. Calvin, as a young teenager, restored my home place, that one room, and we made that into an apartment for the older handicapped boy. I have mostly special needs children. Some can't talk, some can't walk. They're all slow mentality. Maybe the oldest is about 12 in mind, but most of them are younger than that in mind. And they're a handful. But I've adopted 17 of them, in the process of adopting a 2-year-old baby. And they've changed my life. I don't have no depression. I ain't got time. Don't have no loneliness. Don't have no time. But I just want to tell you what Larry and Judy and you people have done is you've made our life different. And I was in just a shell of a building, and I had got the building up with $4,600. That's what I told God I had. And I called a contractor and told him to come and give me an estimate how much it would cost me to build a 50 by 100-foot building. And he said, well, Murray, I can build it, put it up, put windows in it, doors for $90,000. And this little man was standing beside of me, and he started spinning like a top. Round and round. He was so nervous he couldn't stop. And I just looked at him and I said, Bob, we've got a big God, don't we? And I let that man go ahead and build a building. Each week when he finished, sometimes it was $9,000 I had to pay him, sometimes $19,000. Next time it might be $10,000 or $15,000. But when the building was done, I owed nothing. I could not tell you right now where that money come from. Just miracle after miracle. And I was alone. I mean, I didn't have nobody to help me. And it was just a shell. Dirt was real thick on the floor where they never got the sand and the gravels out. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew that we had to start having church in it. And a man from Michigan, Dan, I don't remember, what's his last name? Bierman or something like that. I can't even. Anyway, he came down there. We have a program called Homes Incorporated. They build homes for the poor people. And they're just real simple homes, but they're all done by volunteers from all over the United States. And he had brought a team down from Michigan, and Homes Incorporated would say, every Wednesday you get off. You don't have to work on Wednesday. And there's nothing much here to see, but we encourage you to go over to Linefork and meet a woman over there called Mary Bennett, and maybe do something for her. And they sent me the most wonderful teams, one right after another. And I thought they were supposed to work for me, but they were just supposed to be over there to sightsee and visit. And I was out there having them mowing and cleaning windows, and it was great. I mean, I was getting things done I hadn't had done, and had some Catholics to come down from Ohio, and I was working them girls to death. And I thought they were little rich girls, and I didn't know how to handle it. And they didn't know how to handle me. They didn't know why I put them in the bunkhouse where ladybugs was all over the place. No bathroom. And so Dan said he asked me how I was going to clean up the building, and I told him I didn't know. And he said, well, I'm going to go back to Homes Incorporated and see if those people will help you. And so he brought over the main man, and the man said, how much money do you have for me to work with? And I said, not a penny. And he said, then why don't you close this project down? I can't work without money, and nobody else can. And I looked at him and I said, I can't close this building down. We got to have a church. And so he said, well, I can't help you. And he walked out, and Dan said, well, I'm not leaving until I clean it up. And he went to town and rented 4 or 5 power washers and came back and powered washed the whole building and got all the sand and the gravel and the dirt out. And he said, well, before I go, I'm going to go to town and get some white paint and paint the walls. And he painted all the walls inside, and it was looking really good. There was nothing else in it, just painted walls and clean floor. And so Dan came back to Michigan. He went to Larry Bice and said, will you draw me up a blueprint on how to wire a building? I'm going to go back down there in the mountains and wire this woman's building. And he can tell you more about the story, but finally, Larry said, I'm just going to go down there and do it for you. And he's been stuck down there ever since. I asked Larry once, he and Judy were there with the team, and with Bob and Sue, and I think that was about the only three of you, two couples of you. And Judy was giving him a birthday cake, and I was talking to him, and I said, Larry, why do you do it? You don't know me. You don't know any of us. Why do you keep coming back? And every time he come back, he would do more and more and more to make the building beautiful. And he said, years ago, I prayed that God would give me somebody that was being faithful to help. And I think you're that person. Well, I didn't know if I was that person, but I wasn't going to turn loose. I said, when you got a good thing, you hang on to it. And he's been such a great blessing. And Gary's been down there, and Dick, and Wes. And thank you, Wise, for letting them come and work like dogs down there, because they really work hard when they're down there. And thousands of tons of food. What did God tell me? You won't have to pray for food. There'll be other things you need to pray for, but not food and money. And I don't spend money like you think I would. I'm just a miser, frugal. But I want to pay my way as I go. And I've had the church appraised, Larry, before it was finished. Before it was finished, we put about 50 more thousand in it. It was praised for 850,000 with the steel. It's all steel. And then the house has been appraised, and the guest house has been appraised, and the bunk house has been appraised, and it's running right close to $3 million. I don't know how it happened. I didn't do it. God gets all the glory for it. And it just happened. Just day by day, something else would happen. And the land, we're talking about the land too. My mother bought the land for $1 an acre, and now she willed it to me, and that's what I turned it into, the project of the children's home. We're going to let Calvin. Well, I talked to you about Joey. He was that biracial boy that came, and I told God I didn't care if he was purple, I was going to keep him. Well, he didn't talk. For a couple years, he wouldn't say nothing. And I would tell him, you're a genius. You're just a pure genius. That's what you are. And I would brag on him and tell him how sweet he was, how cute he was, and I cut every little kink out of his hair. I didn't want nobody to think he was anything different. And he would talk to me about, Mom, do you know how hard it is to be a black person in a white world? And I said, well, you have me, and you'll always have me. And I want you to see how God has used him. Maybe to man, he wasn't going to be anything smart. He would have fallen through the cracks with the welfare system. His mother has never been back to see him after she dropped him off. He was just a few days old, and she's never come back. And when I asked him, do you want to see your mother? Do you want me to find her and introduce you to her? He said, no. How can you have fellowship with somebody you don't even know? In other words, she didn't want me when I was a baby. Now I don't need her now. You're my mother. And so the Navy grabbed him. He got a scholarship in the 8th grade. He won a scholarship over thousands of students. He was the first one to ever get it. And it was for 4 years of free college at University of Kentucky. So they mentored him. University of Kentucky mentored him for 4 years through high school, got him ready for transition. Then the Navy got him, and he's just done real wonderful. You want to show that to him, or okay? And then Calvin is here. He's another one of the kids I raised, and he wants to say something.
Hey, Mom. I wanted to take a moment to say thank you for instilling in me the value of persistence, dedication, commitment, and hard work. Over the course of my working career, extending from my teens until now, I have consistently seen that working diligently and with a good attitude will take you further than intelligence or natural talent alone. Applying what I've learned from you, I have been blessed with success in all my pursuits. Either I've been provided with leadership opportunities or I've been given accolades to both praise and reinforce my work ethic. While I was growing up, I have many not so fond memories of waking up at 5 a.m. to mop the floors and vacuum the carpet. At the time, I simply saw the completion of the task as the end goal. However, now as an adult, I see you had a different purpose in mind. You were instilling discipline and character. You taught me that it's not the task that's important or simply getting it done. It's how the person accepts the responsibility, the dedication with which they work, and how they do so to the best of their ability. And for those lessons, Mom, I'm truly thankful. I love you so much.
I'm going to close with Calvin speaking, but I want to thank Dr. Bill Maurer for bringing me up here from Ohio. I've known him for years, and he's an ex-professor, and it's just been wonderful. His wife is a dear, dear friend of mine. And thank you, Bill, for bringing me up here. I've been waiting for this a long time. I wanted to come see you people so bad, and wanted to see Larry and Judy's business and just find out if they were real. They're great. They're great, and I appreciate you so much, Calvin.
I always tell people she's a hard act to follow. And I'm not quite as polished as my brother, so he's a nuclear, we don't even know what he does, but he spent 11 years on a submarine, and he's something to do with a nuclear power plant, so he's pretty smart. But I came to live with Mom when I was somewhere between 4 to 6 years old. I'm not sure, we've both forgotten, I think, so. But nearly 25 years ago, and I always become a little undone. So if I do, excuse me. But you know, I like the other kids in our home would have come through the doors with a garbage bag, and that garbage bag would have contained my belongings from foster care. I moved 7 times in 6 years, and the 7th time I came to live with Mary Bennett. And I would have come through the door with a garbage bag like all my other brothers and sisters. And she would always receive you with your garbage bag and kind of pour it out. You know, I got to see this over and over and over again, so it's a very vivid memory that I experienced, but also that I got to see other people experience as they come through the door. But she would pour that garbage bag out and go through it. And it was always something that child valued, but it wasn't very valuable. It was their belongings, but most of the time it was too small, tattered, dirty. And she would say, oh, okay, let's go upstairs. And she always would keep new things upstairs in a dresser or in the closet, new clothes, new toys. And she would take that person upstairs, and at that point, you know, suddenly they got this one-on-one time with her, and she would give them, you know, new things and get them set up. And at the time, you know, when you're going through things and you see things, sometimes you don't realize the value of those things until you look back on your experiences and on things that you've gone through. But as I look back on that moment, I realized that what was taking place was more than just a physical thing, but she was doing that was her first step. That was her doorway into our lives, and she had so much more in store for us than just, hey, here's new socks, because yours were too small and they don't match. But as I've gotten older, I've realized that what I was seeing was a picture of what the Father does for us. And we come to Him with what we have, oftentimes broken, most of the time broken. If you're not broken, then let's talk after service, because I'd like to know what your secret is. But that's how we come to the Father. And He never says, He never disregards who we are or what we have, but He takes us for what we do have. And He says, Jesus says, but hey, here, come upstairs. I got something better. And He points us to the Father. And when I came to live with Mom, I didn't want necessarily to go there, because I found out right before I went that there was going to be just a mom. It was just her. And I had just been in a foster home that was just an older lady, and that wasn't very nice. So my vibe, my experience of an older lady by herself wasn't what I wanted, Mom wasn't an older lady at the time. That was a long time ago. But I didn't want that. I wanted a mom and a dad. And so I came, and with my sister and my brother, who is also my cousin, so I'll let you figure that one out, was already there. Mom had already adopted him. And so I come, and very insecure issues. The story that she told you earlier about the lady and the two boyfriends, that was, hipsters today would say those were my peeps. That was my family. And that was my mother, who was let out early, 16 years sooner than she should have been. And but what I realized now, looking back, is that I did get a mother and a father. And the father that I did get was Daddy God. He was the Abba Father. And she pointed me in that direction. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that I've been able to, there's certain things that you go through that you're like, man, there's only certain people that you can identify with. Everyone has their own story. Everyone has their own path. And there's certain things that you might even say, well, I don't know if Jesus went through that. You try to identify with Christ and everything. And He took on all the sins of the world, right? Well, when I look to Jesus now, I see, like, wow, Jesus was actually the divine orphan. He looked to His Father and said, man, Dad, if you can take this from me, please. I don't want to be forsaken, from you. I don't want you to look away. Because that's what the Father had to do when Jesus came to die for us. He had to look away, And so Jesus was the divine orphan. And what an example to all of us in our pain, in our suffering. For Jesus, it wasn't about His pain or His suffering. He came with a mission, and His mission was for the people around Him. Now, there was pain that was involved because of the separation that took place, but He was able to look around at the people and said, you know what, because of my pain, I'm going to take someone with me. And, He did that for all of us, to say, well, in my pain, I'm going to use my pain to point someone to the Father, because he at that point knew what it was like to be the divine orphan. And we are all orphans until we come to the Father. And Jesus knew that I can identify with every single person on every single level. And what a commission that is to us to say that your pain isn't about you. We go through life about, you can go to a counselor and they're going to make that pain about you. You getting over it, you working through it, you making the most of it. I grew up watching mom talk to 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds about their pain, about what had just happened. I have a sister that, she would go to the doctor, and the doctor would say, you're not going to be able to have children because of the abuse that's taken place. And instead of waiting 15, 20 years or whatever to say, we'll cross that road when we come to it, mom began to walk us all through our pain in the moment, and if you were outsider looking in, you'd be like, whoa, that is rough. That's a heavy conversation for a 5-year-old person. But forgiveness, the conversation of forgiveness is never too heavy, because the scale of what that person has just experienced has way more weight to it if it's not dealt with by forgiveness in that moment. And the longer the gap between that moment of pain and the moment of forgiveness, your destiny begins to be chipped away. And because our destiny lies within the pain that we experience. There's very few things that can take away from what God has in store for us, except for us, and the way that we deal with the life that happens to us, regardless of what it is, And I've watched Mary Bennett walk through pain, and she shared some of that stuff with you guys this evening, about things that she's walked through, and just to be able to look at her and say, wow, she did what Jesus did, and that was, in her pain and in her moments of forgiveness and grace, instead of saying, this is all about me, my heartache, she looked around at the people that God had already put in her life and said, well, in the middle of my pain, I need to help someone. And we don't do that, we don't do that as people, as believers. We live in kind of block lifestyles, you want to deal with one thing at a time, and when we get through this, we'll deal with this. You get through kindergarten, you go through 8th grade graduation, you go through high school. I mean, that's how we as Americans are geared, It's just, we put areas of our life in boxes, and when we can go through that box and wrap it up, then we're good. We'll move on to the next thing. But the thing about pain is that it doesn't live in one box. It lives in every box. And I've found that there's those moments where that pain, no matter where you're at in life, you will find it. It will find you, offense, unforgiveness. And those are all things that if we help the people around us, then God can use it, on purpose. And so many of the stories that Mom has told has been of her working through her pain, And I was pretty messed up when I came. Still pretty messed up, but it's been interesting to see what God can do through one person. And we as Americans, we want to do something great, especially my generation. They go for the prize, and they want that instant satisfaction now. And we don't look at the people around us. I once heard it said that if you want to change the world, change your world. And those are the stories we grew up hearing. Every Saturday she would sit us down and we would do devotion, and it was so long. It would be 30 minutes, but it felt like it was 3 hours. But she would walk us through stories. Like the story of there was a man who was a bus driver, showed up at a city park to pick up kids. That's where they would come. And he just started looking around and was like, man, this place is dirty. And so he'd come back next week, oh, this place is dirty. He kept coming back and just observing, this place is dirty. So he finally was like, well, I'll take a garbage bag. So he took a garbage bag and collected one garbage bag. He says, well, it looks a little better, but not really. So every day he would just come back, and while he was waiting for his kids, he would just do the one garbage bag a day. And the next thing you know, there was no trash in the park. And then he realized, well, this place is empty, you know? So then he would bring flowers, and he'd plant flowers. And then he says, well, that looks better, but the equipment is all rusty. Then he'd bring paint, and he'd paint it. And he would do that 10 minutes a day. And after a while, he was able to show up to his place, his point in life, and look out and see, wow, look at the difference that I've made. Instead of just showing up, seeing the problem, and never doing anything, he just did a little bit every single day. And those are the things that she would tell us, you know. And she would read from us sections of books about abuse. You know, A Boy Called It, which is pretty heavy. Has anyone here ever read that book? Yeah. It's a pretty heavy book. But it really wasn't that abnormal to us, because we knew what that stuff was all about. We knew what abuse was about. But you know why she did it? She would always tell us, never feel sorry for yourself, because there's always one person out there that has it worse than you do. And I think that she read us that book to point us to that. Hey, let me introduce you to someone who has it worse than you do. And those are the things that I grew up, you know, learning and just walking through. And you know, you're looking at a woman who does life on purpose, and it's so inspiring to even attempt to follow in her footsteps. And you know, if you've been to our area, it's full of need. And you know, Larry's been coming there for 16 years. A few weeks ago, we had an instance where we restored someone's kitchen, and it was just moldy and dirt floors. I mean, if you see the picture, you would say, like, it doesn't look like someone could live there, you know. And it happened to be a lady who's been going to our church for a while, and people there they're very private, you know, and they're very private with their pain. They're private with their issues. So it takes a special method to reach them. And Mom's lived there a long time. I've lived there a long time. So you know, we understand the people there. But I guess, Mom, I just want to say thank you for, you know, I'm 30 years old. I've seen the best of the best. And, you know, the story that you tell about Larry, why do you keep coming? It's because Larry saw the best of the best in her. And like people attract, you know, champions attract champions. And I've been so fortunate over the years, too. The different people that she's attracted because of her faithfulness and her excellence and her faith, you know, her faith in the Lord and relationship with the God has been just mind-blowing. We were having dinner earlier at Larry's table, and Larry's talking about his business values. And, you know, I had a surreal moment where I'm holding back the tears. I don't know if they could see that, but the people at the table with me, Mary Bennett, Mary Bice, Bill Maurer, and you know, there's something about that verse in the Bible that says, "I know the plans I have for you," says the Lord, plans to give you a hope and a future. And but sometimes we just don't slow down enough to like look for it, you know. And she's taught me to slow down. And most of the time, our destiny, our future, is found in our problems, working through those issues. And most of the time, if I've found personally that the more time I've spent working through my issues, it's like I put the car in reverse, and I feel like I'm just losing ground. But when you can look for the people that God has placed in your life and begin to help them, even if it's like the man in the park, 10 minutes a day. Wow. Then suddenly you just... I've found that I never take large steps. It's always like these little baby steps. But, you know, with someone like her, you look back 40 years ago, just baby step after baby step after baby step. And, you know, it's surreal. Sometimes I just like want to pinch myself because I'm thinking, you shouldn't be here doing what you're doing. I have siblings that are... Well, this is probably recorded, so I'll be, you know, I have siblings that, you know, aren't necessarily in very good places that were my biological siblings. But you know what? They didn't have a Mary Bennett. And I've been in touch with them at different times, and they've said that. You were so lucky. I didn't have a Mary Bennett. And it really shows you that we have that opportunity to be the Mary Bennett, you know. And more so than being the Mary Bennett, it's being Jesus. Because Jesus, Mom is modeling what Jesus did in his pain, which is, hey, he pointed him to the Father. So, Mom, I'm good. Larry said I got 15 minutes. I don't know how long that was, but I'm wrapping it up.
Can you see why I go down there and you give to her, and I always say I sure get a lot more back than what I give. She's been an inspiration to me, just like hundreds and thousands of other people, and it's just great to be associated with her. I do have to say one thing. She said she doesn't let one penny stick to her fingers. She does chocolate, because if I can bring chocolate and coffee down there, she's happy. So where's the chocolate? And so it's a wonderful time with her, and just see Calvin and hear him. He's done some marvelous things over the years. I met him first when we determined he was about 14, I think, at the time, and we have had a lot of good times together. He's married and has a baby now, about a year old, and so he just... there's just a lot of good in the world, even in bad places. And I know what it's like down there. I didn't when we started. And you just learn more about it. And you do as much as you can. And if we all do that, wherever we're qualified, that can be in your own backyard, in the neighborhood, or whatever it is. What can you do? And it doesn't have to be a million miles away or anything like that. But it's just... Bill is the one. If you look up Mary Bennett, you have to look up Mary Bennett Linefork, I think, in order to get it. And then underneath there is The Power of One, and that's Bill that's moderating it. And it's just, we played it in this church, I think, once already. So, and it's just another 4 or 5 minutes, just giving you the in there. He calls her the Mother Teresa of Linefork, Kentucky. The interesting thing, there isn't a line fork. It's just a fork in the river. So after about 14 years, I think it was, I said, I've never been to Linefork, and I get laughed at, and there is no line fork. It's just a fork in the river. So anyway, thank you all for coming. I think it's been a great night. I hope it has inspired you to just step out a little bit more, and thank you again.